Hi, I'm Colleen Taylor. You're watching TechCrunch TV. Here with me in the studio, I'm pleased to have Andrew Keen, who is a prominent skeptic of social media. And I'm happy to have you here because you host Keen On at this very desk, but you're normally on this side. And so I just thought this was a good opportunity to talk to you because in the past week, with NSA and Prism, the whole idea of privacy, especially on networks like Facebook, has really been brought to the forefront and something that you've talked about for years now.
Well, thank you, Colleen. Yeah, I mean, I wrote a book last year called Digital Vertigo. I wouldn't say that it necessarily predicted this exactly, and it certainly didn't predict this rather complex relationship between the NSA and some of Silicon Valley's big data companies. But I did warn about two things. I warned that the architecture of the web lent itself to a world of surveillance and voyeurism. That's why I called the book Digital Vertigo, because it's a remix of Hitchcock's great movie Vertigo, which is about surveillance and voyeurism. And secondly, I warned that the model, the free model on the internet, the business model of companies like Facebook and Google, which is dependent on acquiring our personal data in order to make revenue, also means that for the most part they're spying on us, these people. Whether it's the NSA, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, whether it's any of the other big data companies, to make themselves viable, they have to acquire our personal data.
Now, have you seen the denials in the past week from Facebook and all these other companies? They seem to be very cleverly worded. They often use the term direct access. They're not providing direct access to their servers.
I was really struck by, everyone knows, of course, knows Mike Arrington. I was really struck by Mike's arguments on this, on his uncrunched website, because Mike is not a skeptic like myself, but Mike really went after companies like Google and Facebook. I'm not sure, maybe he's modified some of his criticisms a little bit, but I think he's absolutely right. And I think what these companies are doing is hiding behind legal veils to justify what they're doing and denying something which I think most people acknowledge is really troubling. That doesn't excuse the NSA. I'm certainly not going to defend the NSA. And I haven't been following it closely enough. I'm not, like Mike, a legal scholar to actually understand the legal relationship between the NSA and Facebook and Google and the others. Microsoft, everybody's involved in this, Yahoo, but it is very troubling.
Now, your personal solution to this is you're famously not on Facebook. You don't have a Facebook profile. You do have a Twitter profile, which Twitter has not been implicated in this.
Yeah, Twitter's come out of this looking really good. And I've always argued that Twitter seems to be different from the other companies. And I think Twitter should be seen as a model. I really admire what Dick Costello is doing at Twitter. And I think when companies, some of the other companies say, well, we had to do it, it's inevitable, it isn't inevitable. And I think that's the whole point of this chapter. It's a parable about how you need to stand up to government. And
do you think that the solution now should be that people should completely get off of Facebook now that it's starting to become, a question?
No, I'm not. Look, I get criticized as a skeptic. I am, but I'm certainly not a Luddite. I don't think that we should. I'm not on Facebook because I find it annoying, and I also, I'm on Twitter. And as I said, as a writer, if you're not on Twitter, you should have your arm chopped off. But I think that we need to think much more critically about the architecture of the web, about what it's doing to our privacy, what it's doing to our individualism, both as citizens and as consumers. Jaron Lanier just wrote an excellent book. He was on my show. He talks about some reforms that need to happen. I've seen that organizations like the EFF now are talking about radical solutions. This is the, and I was always talking about this is the Exxon Valdez of the internet. After Exxon Valdez, environmentalism suddenly became a lot more credible, coherent, and important. This event, however Snowden himself, I don't think is that interesting, but however it gets resolved, is forcing everyone to think much more critically about this big data economy. It's forcing everyone to think much more critically about the panopticon-like architecture of the web, where we're being watched in everything we do. I don't want a solution where either you're on the web and you're watched or you're not on the web. I want to maintain the web. I want to reform it. I want to re-architect it in ways in which privacy is central rather than an impossibility.
And there's the global angle. You've talked about this book on a global scale. You've traveled the world talking to people about this, but it's interesting that it's the U.S. government that's being implicated here and not some other regime.
Yeah, I think the U.S. side of it is fascinating. A lot of, I talk a lot in the rest of the world, and often people see the internet as an instrument of American imperialism or cultural colonialism. And I think there's some truth in that, in this particular case, where clearly the NSA are using it to spy on citizens of other countries, which I think is really troubling. I think some people in America seem to think that's okay. For me, it's deeply distressing, and I know governments overseas, because the most scary thing about the internet in the way it's been built is if it becomes a vehicle for the American Secret Service and a vehicle for the paranoia of certain people in government who seem to be increasingly obsessed with terrorism. So that is really scary.
Now, there are a lot of people out there who say, I have nothing to hide, and I'm just issuing Facebook updates about having a picnic with my kids, and my email just contains normal stuff. What do you say to those people? Why do they need to worry about this?
Well, there's two issues there. I mean, there's stuff that we publicly publish, stuff we put on Facebook, which may be true. But I think what this NSA story reveals is the fact that the stuff that we don't want to be seeing, whether it's emails, obviously phone calls, instant messaging, private DMs on Twitter, those can all be seen as well. The architecture of the internet lends itself to publicness, and publicness is disturbing. Now, to those people who say I have nothing to hide, there are a few saints out there, and you're very lucky. But for the rest of humanity, for someone like myself who has a lot to hide, I assume you have a lot to hide, right?
Tons.
You don't want everyone seeing everything you write, everything you do.
It's dark.
And the way in which the internet has evolved in terms of its architecture is when you get a paranoid government, they can justify looking at everything.
Right. And it's not about what's legal today necessarily. This data stays around forever. So something could be legal today and you could be completely fine under the current regime, but in 10 years, maybe not.
Yeah, I've made the argument continually that for the internet to become a viable platform for 21st century life, it needs to learn how to forget. It's very good at remembering. It remembers everything, but that's not human. The distinctive thing about us as human beings is we know how to forget. That enables us to forgive. That enables us to reinvent ourselves. And until the internet learns how to forget, that may need some legislation from government. I know that Viviane Reding in the EU, who I've spoken with, I spoke at DLD, is trying to bring a law which requires the internet to forget our data. Now, I'm not sure whether that's viable or appropriate, but that's the kind of thinking that we need to encourage. Forgetting is key. And I encourage entrepreneurs out there, we've done this a lot on my show, entrepreneurs should be thinking about privacy-centric companies which reinvent the internet in ways in which data is forgotten. I know that there are some interesting new startups, DuckDuckGo, for example, in New York, which is focused on protecting data. These, I think, are the companies that need to be encouraged. Technology is not the problem, it can be the solution as well.
Have you used Snapchat?
Well, I'm a bit dubious about Snapchat for two reasons. Firstly, I think it encourages adolescent pornography, at least according to my son. Everyone in his class is using it because they think that it doesn't remember anything. The problem with Snapchat, of course, is that you can still snap the chat and it doesn't automatically disintegrate. But I think the idea of Snapchat is interesting, and I think its popularity also reflects the fact that most people don't want to be remembered. Most people want to go on the internet to do their business, chatting, buying stuff, commenting, but they don't want it to be recorded for posterity. They're just not interested in that. That's not what we're about as human beings. We want to be forgotten. We don't want to be remembered.
All right. Well, Andrew Keen, on that note, thank you for swinging
You'll remember
by.
me, though, won't you?
I'll never forget you, Andrew Keen. So thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you.